Welcome back, gentlemen. Get ready for the last sprint of the popes to the end of the course. As usual, time seems to run out on any history course I've ever taught before. Anyway, so here we go. One of the key popes you need to have a handle on, Pius IX. His nickname is Pio Nono. Has a good flow to it, Pio Nono. And he's a great pope. As we turn the clock back, he had the thing on John Paul the Great last week because it was his birthday. But John Paul is maybe the most prominent of the modern popes. Pio Nono is the pope at the bridge from the Baroque to the modern, or maybe the first to the modern, so it's really helpful to give it a look. Okay, so Pius IX, Pio Nono, fits into this course because it's the beginning of the modern age, like I just mentioned, right? Although because it's the beginning of the modern age, there are more vestiges, holdovers, if you want to think of it that way, from the Ancient regime and the Baroque age. His pontificate is the longest in history. I don't know, it's the only one I know of the top of my head that's longer than John Paul the Great's, from 1846 to 1878. Now, in 1848, the revolutions that part of the earlier part of the course, the Second Industrial Revolution, the rise of the middle class, the Civil War in the United States, I should say the so-called Civil War in the United States. It really should be called the War Between the States, I think. And the unification of Germany and Italy were all game changers on the world stage. These things really changed everything. It's an image of Pio Nono, early photograph. Okay, well, when Pio Nono was first elected Pope in 1846, he was thought of as a liberal, right? Now remember, that's a loaded word. Right? It comes from the root of free, right? And there's this whole idea of classical liberalism and a philosophical movement. And he was kind of hailed as one. He thought he would be a liberal kind of Pope. Meaning kind of progressive, closer to the spirit of the age, that type of meaning, right? And he introduced reforms that were along those lines of the time, right? They had a civil prime minister in the papal states, meaning he was elected to run the government, with a constitution, which, constitutions tend to limit the authority of the government. That's a classical liberal idea, one that that I'm very fond of. And political amnesty, so if you disagreed, you wouldn't get in trouble, right? You could still live there, kind of thing. Okay, but he was not a liberal in the secular sense of the time. Remember, the word secular has to do with this world, right? And then depending on the attitude of that secularity, sometimes it's this world at the exclusion of the faith, right? And he definitely wasn't that, right? He refused to fight against the Austrians who controlled northern Italy, okay, which would have been what the liberals at the time would have wanted. And then when the Italian nationalists assassinated the prime minister of the Papal States, they took over, and a real liberal move of the time proclaimed a Roman Republic, and the Pope had to flee to Naples, requiring the protection of French troops, and then eventually was able to return to Rome. After that, he pretty much opposed the political currents for his pontificate. Trying to, he was very leery of them, as you would imagine, especially to be a prisoner. The most famous document that Pio Nono is connected to is called the Syllabus of Errors, which was really an addendum to another encyclical. Okay, the Syllabus of Errors really repeated earlier teachings of the Church, errors of the early modern age, errors that had been condemned in earlier texts of the Magisterium. What was new was the form of it and the uncompromising accent that these propositions seemed to contain now that they were taken and laid out in a single document, very strongly worded, and with a real edge to it. Okay, the syllabus anathematized the absolute autonomy of reason, religious naturalism, indifferentism, materialism, attacks on the family, the defense of divorce, etc. Okay? Now, anathematized means that if you knowingly embrace these things, you are anathema. That is to say, exiled. We will have no contact with you. Right? It's a very severe censure. That's the worst thing. So if you embrace the absolute autonomy of reason, what does that mean? It means the Christian can't think for himself? No, absolutely not, of course. But that you can't make everything up for yourself. Or that you don't accept anything you can't understand fully. That there are many things that we don't understand that are realities. Why does gravity work the way it does? You can talk about atoms and what have you, and I don't fully get it, but I know that it is a reality, and I don't allow myself to reject it just because I don't fully understand it. And of course, that's an everyday example, not an example of the faith. But what the truths that are revealed are beyond our ability to fully comprehend. We use the term mystery. And we basically accept something that's beyond our intellect. We acknowledge the limits of it. So it is not totally autonomous. Indifferentism is to say that every religion is the same as the others. And of course, like any heresy or any bad idea, it has some elements of truth in it. Most religions have some elements of the truth in them. Most of them try to help their adherents live a good life, that type of thing. They have a common sense of morality. So some people say, well, it means that it doesn't matter whether you're Catholic or Protestant or Jewish or Muslim, that you should be a good one of those things. We say, well, no, it matters a lot because they can't all be true. On the other hand, like I said, we do acknowledge that someone can be sincere. But it's not to say that they're all the same. Or else why would you actually be a Christian if you didn't think it was really true? Materialism says that there's no element for the soul. There's no spiritual dimension. Those are just some of the examples. But basically, and these, again, there's not new teachings in the faith, but they're coming with the modern age, and they're coming in a different way. And Pio IX really, in the syllabus of errors, really laid down the law, so to speak, that these are bad ideas. The progressive Catholics of the time were angry at the syllabus because it seemed to shut off dialogue with these things. Traditionalists supported it. Now, the temporal power of the popes ended in 1870. Remember, the papal states go back to the father of Charlemagne, Pepin the Short, who donated the land to help keep the Pope safe so that he could govern the church, right? And so you're talking about, a millennium of where the Pope had temporal lands for protection, but also temporal governments. A lot of headaches that go with that, right? But as this time in history, both Germany and Italy, which have been kind of separate amalgamations of dukedoms and principalities, right? But as Italy is uniting, these small pieces of the papal states fell into the Piedmontese kingdom, of northern Italy. The French left Rome in 1870 to fight the Prussians, who were in the process of uniting Germany. And then the soldiers of Victor Emmanuel made Rome the capital of a new Italy. The Pope withdrew into the Vatican, so a chunk of Rome, right? As a voluntary prisoner, and he rejected the law of guarantees which he was offered because he would have compromised certain things, autonomy, this type of thing. The Roman question began, which is, how does the church fit in with the Italian government, the Italian country, the city of Rome, right? It took 60 years to solve. Essentially, the Vatican is treated like the world's smallest country, right? The square mile or so that it is in part of Rome it's kind of a separate country, diplomatically and legally. That was the solution that was eventually arrived at. Now, at the time, right, losing the papal states was considered a disaster. A lot of people thought that it might be the end of the church. Right? For 1,000 years, the papal states were regarded as an essential guarantee of the independence of the popes. Right? But on the contrary, this was a time of great spark in life in the history of the church. The Immaculate Conception was proclaimed, right? That is that Mary was conceived without original sin by special grace won by her Son, that she was conceived in the normal way of marriage, but she was not subject to the selfishness of original sin that the rest of us are. The Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to St. Bernadette at Lourdes in 1858. At the end of her several appearances there, she said she was the Immaculate Conception. A lot of doctrine was clarified under Pius IX's pontificate, including the Immaculate Conception. There's this thing of the Oxford movement, which as an English speaker is dear to my heart, because in the Church of England, there were a lot of high-powered intellectuals that were really on fire to get to know Christ better. And a lot of them pushed and prayed and studied and found their way back into the Catholic Church. The most prominent of them is Cardinal John Henry Newman, which is why in a lot of American universities you might have a Newman Society or a Newman Center for Catholics. Cardinal Newman was a brilliant Anglican, and he started to write a book on why I say the Anglican Church was right and the Catholic Church was wrong, and then he ended up studying and writing and his way, like I said, across the Tiber into the Catholic Church. He was canonized by, just fairly recently, by Pope Benedict, I think. No, it might have been Pope Francis. We'll see a little bit later. The First Vatican Council was held and clarified papal infallibility. Old religious orders like the Benedictines, the Dominicans, and the Jesuits grew and spread considerably. So in all, an era of great dynamism for the church. Some people fault the tone of the syllabus of errors. I don't know. I think it's a judgment call, but definitely the errors are errors. That's not a judgment call. That's just a reality. Anyway, I'm gonna load this up today, boys. Get ready for some questions about it. Hope you're well. Bye.